Okay, we are on the bottom of 107b. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, Omer, Shnei Achsanim. So two people come to an inn. And the Mishnah said they eat on the same table. They don't know each other. There's no worry. They're going to come and take from each other's food and have meat and milk together. So says the Gemara, Amar of Rechanan, Amar of Shmuel, Lo shanu elosh ein makirin zedze, aval makirin zedze aser. This is only if they don't know each other. They're coming through town, each one coming from their own locale, and therefore they can eat on the same table, and there's no worry. They're going to take one from the other. Aval makirin zedze aser. They do know each other. They are friends. So then we are worried that one's going to take from the other, and they're going to be eating meat and milk together. Tanya Nami Hachi says the Brisa, Rabbi Shimon Omer Shtei Achshanan Shenis Archul Lepunik Echad, two guests that end up in one hotel, in one inn. Zebam in the top, and this one comes from the north. Zebam in the Durham. This one comes from the south. Zeba Bechaticha. So the Zeba Bigvinaso. He comes with his piece of meat, and he comes with his cheese. Ochlin al Shulchan Echad. Zebaser v'Zegvina. Ve'ein choshishin. You can eat your meat, he can eat his cheese, and we're not worried. Because there are people that come from different parts of the country. We have no idea who they are. They don't know who each other are. So he can eat his meat, and he can eat his cheese, and there's nothing to worry about. V'lo asru ella b'tfisa achas. And they only prohibited this when it sounds like tied together, when it's in one Ziploc bag. So says the Gemara, Tvisa achas takadaitach. So it says in a Tvisa achas, putting it in one wrapping is prohibited regardless of your table or not your table, because they're going to be absorbed one from the other. So it says, no, what I mean is, Ella ke'ein Tvisa achas. It's prohibited to eat them together on one table, which is like one setting, meaning in one little table. It's prohibited to eat if you know each other and you're friendly. He's eating cheese and he's eating meat. They say that it could be the placemats, different placemats is either a different placemat is like two different tables, or you put down a clear sign that we don't eat from each other. So if you put something random on the table between the two people, so that it's a remembrance not to go take his cheese or his meat. But just on one table, just eating meat and cheese is prohibited. Only Rav Yemar bar Shalmiya le'Abaye. Rav Yemar bar Shalmiya says to Abaye, Shnei Achin, so you have two brothers, so they know each other, but they're makpidin zelzeh. They're in a scuffle. They're very strict to each other, meaning we don't touch each other's food. That's not how we were raised. I don't like you, you don't like me. So, right, we'll sit together, but we don't even communicate. We don't even talk to each other. So the question is, on the one hand, they're brothers, so it should be a problem. On the other hand, they're makpidin zelzeh. They're stringent with each other, meaning they don't eat from each other's food. So what's the halacha? The Gemara is going to use a phrase from baking matzahs. So they used to have these decorated matzahs. I think it's a different forms. They used to make them certain decorations. The problem was they just took a long time to make. So they were worried that by the time you finish forming out your beautiful, your beautiful 5-star matzah over here, it's going to become chametz. So they didn't allow these things to be made. But there's a guy named Baitos, so he was able to do it very quickly. He had a form at home. He was able to put it on. Chick chock, comes out decorated cake. So maybe that should be permitted. So on that, the Gemara says, Amar le yomru kol asrikin asrunu shike Baitos mutarin. You want to say all the forms matzahs are going to be prohibited, but forms matzahs of Baitos are going to be permitted? Meaning, we don't make exceptions. So to here, two brothers are two brothers. That should be prohibited. So says the Gemara, according to that reasoning, uleta meich, that we don't make exceptions. So Hadam Rabasi, Rabbi Yochanan, Misha Eno Ela Chalak Echad, Mutar L'Chavsa B'Chol HaMoed. So we know that on Chol HaMoed there are a number of prohibited acts similar to Shabbos, but there are a number of exceptions. So you're not supposed to do laundry. You're not allowed to do laundry on Chol HaMoed. Obviously, if you only have one shirt, so then you could wash your shirt if you need it. So says well, maybe we should say that's prohibited also, because they're going to say Yomru, next page, Kol Asrikin Asrun, well, they're going to say that all those people's clothing is prohibited, and this guy's is permitted. You should prohibit it as well. Says the Gemara, no, that's not a good logic, because Hamarashi, Ezuro Mochiachalab. The guy with one shirt, so he always has a belt that's around his around his waist. Now, when he takes off the only shirt that he has, so he takes off the belt too, because what does he have? He's had some kind of robe to cover him up. So basically, no one sees the belt. When the shirt's being washed, the belt's off too. So that's enough of a sign that people aren't going to think that washing clothes on a Chol Moed is permitted. What are we worried about? You have a congregation of 20 people, and 19 aren't doing laundry on Chol Moed. One guy keeps showing up with a fresh shirt. So how'd that happen? They said, no, we know that guy, when he takes off his shirt, the belt comes too. The belt. So therefore, we're going to know that no, that's a unique case. That's a unique case. That's a guy who's more in need. So you can't use that logic. You can't use that logic by us either. Yeah, so that's why when we go back to the brothers, even though they happen to be stringent with each other, not eat from each other's food, but we say, too bad. It's like saying about the 4 matzahs. We're not making exceptions. But we're not making exceptions, but not as far as the guy with the clothing, because there it's obvious, it's very visible that he's not a regular guy. That he only has one shirt, and since it's very obvious that he's unique and he stands out, then we're not worried about people confusing it. Okay, this is the very famous page of Laws of Kashrus. This page 108 is the classic, the starting place. So the whole, basically, until the bottom of the page, we're going to be discussing what we discussed 8 pages ago, called chanan, where you have milk that goes into a piece of meat. So you can't have milk and meat together, that we know. So how do you view it? That the milk inside the meat is prohibited, or the entire piece of meat is prohibited, right? So if only the milk in the meat is prohibited, so all you need is 60 times the milk, and you'll nullify it, it'll be permitted. If when the milk goes inside the meat, it's spread throughout the whole piece, and you view the entire piece as prohibited, well, then when that falls into something else, you need now 60 times corresponding to the entire piece of meat. That's what we call chanan, chaticha, a piece. Nasa nevela, the piece becomes a forbidden piece, even though the prohibition is only according to the milk that goes in, but we view the entire piece as prohibited, and therefore if it goes into another mixture, so you'll need 60 times corresponding to the piece of meat, and not to the milk inside the meat. That's one. Number 2 is that we're going to see that Rav, who's going to say this novelty, goes like the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, that 2 things of the same species do not nullify each other. So therefore, it's going to keep repeating itself that a piece of meat, which the entire piece becomes prohibited because milk went inside, when that gets mixed with other pieces, so the piece will not be nullified. The other pieces won't be nullified because it's the same species. Now, we can also hold of this concept that a piece of meat, the entire piece becomes prohibited, not just the milk inside the meat, in a case of where it's a piece of meat in a bunch of chulin, where it's saucy. Those are 2 different species. One is the meat and one is the gravy. One is the sauce. One is the soup. Your chicken in the soup. So the concept of chanan, that the piece becomes a nevela, is not exclusive to Rabbi Yehuda's opinion that 2 things of the same species don't become nullified, even though we're going to keep putting those 2 together. that's just because Rav holds of that. But even if you take a piece of meat, which now has a little bit of milk in it, and in that piece of meat, there is not 60 times corresponding to the milk. So the way we view it is the entire piece of meat becomes prohibited. The entire piece becomes a nevela, as if it's not kosher meat. Just like non-kosher meat falls into the soup. So you have to see, is there 60 times the soup corresponding to the piece of meat? So to this piece of meat that had some milk inside of it is going to have the same laws. That's called chanan. Now, the Gemara is going to start with what we always thought was obvious in all of these discussions, but the Gemara is going to present two opinions about it, is that taste transfer is a very big novelty. You would have thought, biblically, the only thing that's prohibited is the actual piece, a substantial piece of prohibition, whether it's meat and milk, whether it's pork, whatever the case is, but it's a piece, something with called mamashos, like the word mamash in Hebrew. It's a substance. There's a novelty that if taste from this prohibited substance goes into something else, even that taste has the status of the substance itself. And that's referred to as ta'am, taste. Ke'ikr is like the primary substantial food. Now, that's a novelty, which we've been assuming, but we're going to see now it's two opinions, Abai and Rava. Okay, and the third thing, we'll wait till we get there. Okay, so, tipas chalav, this is the famous Mishnah. Tipas chalav, a drop of milk. A drop of milk, shenafla al hachaticha. It falls onto a piece of meat. So you have your steak, you have your chicken, whatever it is, let's go with steak. And now a little drop of milk falls onto it. Now, this is there's a debate exactly. Is it above everything else in the pot or in the pot? Rashi says, let's say it's half in, half out. So it's in the pot. So the milk falls on a piece of meat. So now you're looking at this piece of meat and you're saying, Im yesh ba b'nosei tam, if there is 60 times of taste of meat corresponding to drop of milk, so then Im yesh ba b'nosei tam, be'oso chaticha aser. So if there's enough milk to give off flavor, which means that there is not 60 corresponding to it, so it's a smaller piece of meat, the entire piece of meat is aser, is prohibited. Now, what happens if the drop of milk falls on the piece of meat, and now you mix it up? So what happens when you mix something up? It's dispersion. So near as like kedera, and now you mix up the pot. Im yesh ba b'nosei tam ba'oso kedera aser. So now that piece of milk wasn't, the pot is cooking, it's on the stove. So that milk now, before it had a chance really to totally, absorb in the piece of meat, you mix it right away. So now what happened? So now, im yesh ba b'nosei tam ba'oso kedera, if there's enough milk to spread throughout the pot, so then the pieces in the pot are going to become prohibited. Yeah. So if enough taste transfers to the rest of the pot, so then it'll prohibit it. Yeah. Okay.
So if you don't stir it, sitting in the pot.
So where did it go? That is the whole thing. Where did it go? Landed on the piece of meat. Now there's the debate. Where's that piece of meat? So meaning the problem is in cooking, everything travels, right? So Rashi understands that the piece of meat is in the pot, at least somewhat in the pot, right? If it's fully in the pot, it never hits the piece of meat exclusively. It hits everything else in the pot. So sounds like what he means is it's probably half in, half out. The problem is toast doesn't like that because half in, half out. So that means that you're connected to the rest of the pot. So the real behind the scenes question is just like this. Perfect. That when when a drop of milk hits a piece of meat, it's half it's out of the pot, the top part of it. And the bottom part of the meat is with the rest of the pot. So, how do you view that? Is it possible that it just disperses in the piece of meat? and somehow does not travel to the rest of the pot? Is that possible? Or you say no, because when it's cooking, it just travels up and down. So the second hits the top of the piece, the taste gets transferred straight to the rest of the pot. So to which Tosfos says, therefore, it has to be that it's really just resting on top of the pot. It's outside the pot. It's not immersed in the pot. If it would be immersed, you can't just focus on this one piece. You have to look at the whole pot as a whole. Well, Rashi interestingly says that no, it could be half in, half out, and still just the piece itself could be prohibited.
Something similar with it's wine. If wine is flowing down here, it comes into contact with something. Flows back.
Interesting. Yeah.
Something about that. Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So Rashi, a little bit of the novelty that you could have milk go into a piece of meat. Part of the piece is outside the pot, and it's self-contained. It's contained. It doesn't automatically spread to the rest. Now, if you drop that milk in the pot, it would just spread to everything. So what's the difference? But Tosfos says, yeah, right away he says that here the piece of meat is entirely outside of the sauce, outside of the gravy, outside of the liquid, whatever liquid you have in your cooking in your. Yeah. But we see Amar Abaye that what do we see though? That taimo velo mamasho, taste itself and not substance, just taste. In general, the alma, like the word olam in the world, the alma is de'oraisa, is biblical. That we see from our Mishnah because if there's enough taste transfer, it'll prohibit the piece as long as there's enough taste transfer. Now, 1 second. Yeah. So Amar Abaye, taimo, just the taste itself, just the taste, v'lo mamasho, the alma d'oraisa, in general must be biblical. Why? How do you see from our Mishnah? If you would think that it's only rabbinic, meaning everyone agrees that taste transfer is prohibited, the question is on a biblical level or on a rabbinic level. So says Abaye, it has to be biblical. If it was rabbinic, this is a math equation. If taste transfer would be rabbinic, now we know by meat and milk, it's for sure prohibited, right? We know that if meat goes into milk, that milk is prohibited. Now it's easier to focus on that case because when milk goes into meat, it's the question how you view it. It's the actual milk going into the meat, but the other way is easier. The meat goes into the milk. So in the milk is a taste of meat. That's for sure prohibited, biblically. No one's going to argue on that. The question is, what about everywhere else? Does that apply everywhere else? So Abaye says it has to apply everywhere else. Why? Because if everywhere else was rabbinic, that would mean that you wouldn't learn from meat and milk. Meat and milk for sure has taste transfer. No one argues. The meat going into the milk, prohibited. Now, if the rest of Torah, the rest of the prohibitions that transfer taste over, such as non-kosher meat goes into something, falls into your non-kosher piece of pork falls into your chulin, you remove the piece of pork and you throw it in the garbage, but now hold on, there's taste of pork in the chulin. So is that rabbinic or biblical? So says Abaye, it has to be biblical. Because if it was rabbinic, what would that mean? If it was rabbinic, it would mean that you would not learn from meat and milk. Now, why would you not learn from meat and milk? Because there's something unique about meat and milk. Okay, so these takadaitak the rabbanon, then mibasar bechol of my time a low gamrinan. Why would you not learn from meat and milk? Because maybe it's a novelty and you can't apply it other places. The chidushu, it's a novelty. Now, chidushu, if it was a novelty, so then if it was a novelty that meat and milk is prohibited, so why do you need our Mishnah to tell you that in the world of meat and milk, you have to have taste transfer? Maybe any combination of meat and milk is prohibited. Maybe even if the meat goes into the milk and doesn't transfer taste, meaning it's not discernible, meaning there's more than 60 times milk that nullifies the meat. But no, if meat and milk is such a novelty that you can't apply it other places to other prohibitions, we'll explain what the novelty is in a second, but it's very simple. Meat and milk are permitted on their own, and you put it together, it's prohibited. That's a big novelty, at least one of the novelties. So if meat transferring taste into milk is really such a novelty, since before you started, meat and milk are both permitted, and all of a sudden now they're prohibited, that's a novelty of the Torah. Well, if it's such a novelty, then why do you need it to be less than 60 times to be prohibited? Even if there's more, even if there's 1,000,000 times milk corresponding to the smallest little bit of meat, let it be prohibited. Because once it's a novelty, how far do you go? Once it's a novelty, it's not going to go by the regular rules of the Torah. So, and yet we see from our Mishnah that you need it to have taste transfer. It has to be no Saint Tom. If it's more than 60 times corresponding to it, it'll be nullified. So, from the fact that, so says Abaye, it must be that everywhere else in the Torah, taste transfer is biblical. How do I know? From meat and milk. Because if it would be rabbinic, I could not learn from meat and milk, because meat and milk is a novelty. Novelty being the meat and the milk are both permitted, and now together they're prohibited. That's a big novelty. So, and if we view that as a big novelty, then even the slightest bit of transfer should be prohibited, and yet we don't say that. So, my time meaning the chidushu, nami. Yet we don't say that. The Mishnah tells us you need to have discernible transfer of taste, not any little bit. So I see from the fact that you need that it's not such a novelty, and therefore you can apply that taste transfer of meat and milk can apply other places. And therefore, everywhere else in the Torah, taste transfer will be biblical and not rabbinic. That's all Abaye. Rashi points out there's another novelty with meat and milk, and it's prohibited to cook it. Why can't you cook it? The Torah says you can't cook it. But that's a novelty compared to other things. Other food restricted items is prohibited to eat them. Not to cook them. Go cook your pork from today till tomorrow. No one cares. Yeah, well, what's wrong? Go for it. So you just can't eat the pork. But yet this prohibited food, it's even prohibited to cook. So there's two novelties about meat and milk. First of all, meat and milk are both permitted. Right? Pork is born prohibited, but meat and milk is both permitted. Just putting them together, all of a sudden now it's prohibited. Like, how does that happen? So number two is because the novelty, and number two is that it's also prohibited to cook, which in the world of forbidden foods, we don't usually find that if things are prohibited to cook. We find that they're prohibited to benefit from, not eating, but not cooking. So that's all Abaye. Amar le Rava says, really, you'll say, he'll break the assumption. Basar b'chalav, meat and milk, is a novelty. You're right. That but just because it's a novelty is not a proof. And so Rava says, meat and milk is a novelty, and actually Rava holds that the transfer of taste in every other area in the Torah is rabbinic. So if a piece of pig falls into your chulin and you remove the pig, throw in the garbage, that taste transfer, that the most that is a rabbinic prohibition, because meat and milk is really a novelty, and you can't apply it other places. Now, Abaye was making an assumption that if it's such a novelty, it should not require a discernible transfer of taste. Even the slightest transfer should be prohibited. Rava says, yeah, but the way the Torah prohibits meat and milk is you shall not cook it. It never says you shall not eat it. It says 3 times you shall not cook it. So Rava says you learn from there, Amalei Rava, derech bishul asra Torah, that the way meat and milk was cooked, this is an important line, is that it was prohibited in the way of cooking. And when you cook things, they always transfer taste. So the way it was cooked, so part of its definition of its prohibition is that it's prohibited in the normal way of cooking. And since normal way of cooking is transferring taste, this prohibition will only be prohibited with a discernible transfer of taste. The way normal cooking usually happens, it's a discernible. Now, this definition of meat and milk is important because it comes up in another place outside of this context, and And here you could say it's only Rav and not Abaye, but it comes up in Sanhedrin, and everyone agrees to it. So I believe. So the question is, what's considered normal cooking? Cooking is always water. But from this line, there's the debate. Frying, roasting, from the primary vessel being poured onto something else. How loose is this definition now? Frying, roasting, deep frying, pick your transfer of heat. So everyone debates if it fits into this line or not with different proofs.
So with logic,
Yeah.
you could take your cold cuts and dip it in milk as a gravy.
Well, rabbinically, it's prohibited.
Yeah, but I'm specifically the way Rabbi is putting it.
It's like you take your cold cuts.
Cold cuts, it's cold. So
it's cold. Okay.
Cold milk.
Yeah.
You dip it in like you would dip.
Everyone's going to agree to that. I mean,
a minute.
To dip, yeah. Now, to eat it, we had yesterday we had 2 cold foods, right? You have to wash off. So if you were to dip your cold cuts into milk because for some reason you lost the bet, I don't know why, right? And now you're hungry for cold cuts, that's all you brought for your lunch. So you had a thing at work where they challenged you. So you have to wash off the cold cuts. Yeah. But if, let's say, without realizing, your cold cuts got dipped into a boiling pot of milk, right? And now, the taste transfer, it would be rabbinically prohibited, not biblically prohibited. According to Rava, and according to Abaye, it would be biblically prohibited. Okay, so that is Abaye and Rava. So now, Rava gets us started. So now, Amar Rav. Now, Rav is the one that's the famous Rav who says, Kevan Shanasan Tam, what happens when there's a transfer of taste into a piece of meat? We don't just view the prohibition as the taste inside the piece. We view the entire piece as prohibited. Just like you would an animal that wasn't shechted, you view the entire piece as prohibited. So, chaticha atzma nasan avela, the entire piece of meat is prohibited. And therefore, according to Rav, if that piece of meat falls into a pot of other pieces of meat, it's going to prohibit the other pieces of meat. Meaning, in the other pieces of meat, there are 60 times, let's say, the milk inside the piece of meat. Piece A. There is a little bit of milk in piece A, and there are 60 times corresponding to the milk, but there is not 60 times corresponding to the piece. So Rava says, if that piece now falls into other pieces, what's going to happen? The oseres kol hachatichos kulan. It will prohibit all the other pieces. Why? Mipnei shehein mina, because they're the same species. Now, who's the one who holds things of the same species are prohibited? Rabbi Yehuda. That's the Rabbi Yehuda. Now, Amar le Mar Zutra Beid Rav Mari le Ravina, says Mar Zutra, the son of Rav Mari to Ravina. 1 second. You just told me that Rav Kiman Amar Lishmati Rabbi Yehuda. Rav goes like Rabbi Yehuda, who says, right, we had that case with the cup, and there's on Yom Kippur, there's the blood of the bull and the blood of the goat, and the Torah still refers to them as 2 separate things, even though they're mixed together. So you see, 2 things, blood of the same species, don't nullify each other. That's Rabbi Yehuda's proof, and he applies it across the board. So to here, 2 pieces of meat, 1 kosher, 1 non-kosher. I don't care if you have 1,000,000 times corresponding to it. 2 things of the same species can't nullify each other. Only 2 things of different species. If a piece of meat falls into a cholent, then it could nullify it. But the liquid can nullify the piece. But things of the same species can never be nullified. So he says, you hold like Rabbi Yehuda, obviously, that says the things of the same species don't nullify each other. That's why he held that if one piece that's prohibited now, because milk went inside of it, falls into a bunch of other pieces, they're all going to be prohibited. I shouldn't nullify it. It's so many more pieces of permitted meat than there is prohibited meat, so it should nullify it. The answer is no. It doesn't get nullified because it's the same species. The problem is like this. If that's true, so then lema pliga ad Rava. Rava explains Rabbi Yehuda in a certain case, and it sounds like Rav argues in that case. I don't know. Every time, I don't know how many times I've thought about this case. It's still beyond me. But it's every time I try to get a little clearer. I don't know. It's a very novel case. So the Amar Rava, we actually had this a little bit earlier, but now this is really the source. The Amar Rava, Kisav Rabbi Yehuda. So you have, what do you have? You have a piece of prohibited meat, you have a piece of permitted meat, and you have a bunch of liquid. make believe it's in the liquid. So now, Rav Yehuda holds, right, prohibited and permitted are not going to nullify each other because it's the same species. But you have enough liquid here to nullify the prohibited. But if you put these two together, prohibited and permitted, it doesn't have enough to nullify it. So what do you do? Now this, Rashi keeps saying this, I don't fully understand it, but this permitted piece of meat is not doing anything. It's not helping, it's not hurting. It's just here. So Rabbi Yehuda says like this, you can, so when you look at this mixture, it seems like, I don't know if I'm right about this, but it seems like when you look at a mixture, so in time, it's all here in front of you. But in logic, which two do you isolate first? These two are fighting with each other. Prohibited piece of meat, permitted liquid, right? They want to nullify each other. Here's the clash. Here, there's no clash. There's no, these two can't nullify each other. There's no clash here. And there's no clash here between the permitted piece of meat and the liquid because they're both permitted. So it sounds like when you're looking at what to look at first, you can, this piece of permitted meat, you can make believe it's not here for a second, right? It doesn't exist. You isolate it. What do you have left? You have enough liquid to nullify this piece. So you'll view it as nullified. You'll view it as, you salak es mino kamisha eno. You take the piece of the permitted meat as if it's not here. Now you have enough liquid to nullify the prohibited piece of meat. And therefore, the mixture will be permitted. That's a leniency in the world of Rabbi Yehuda. So, yeah, it came up not so long ago. It came up 8 pages ago. When we were discussing Rav and Hanan also, yeah. Now, okay, so what, he's pliga the Rava. The Amar Rava, Kisav Rabbi Yehuda, Kol Shu Mino V'davar Acher, any species and a species, meaning two things of the same species, prohibited and permitted. A is prohibited, B is permitted. V'davar Acher, C. C is a permitted, but it's a davar acher. It's something else. It's a different species. Let's say a liquid. What do? Salik es mino kimisha eno. You take the B permitted, and now v'she'eno mino C, which is the other species, rabo olav mavatlo, and you nullify A. Now, our case, presumably the milk, the piece of meat that had milk inside of it, fell into other pieces of meat, but they're presumably in some kind of liquid. It fell into a pot. We're talking about cooking. Cooking means water. So now, 1 second. Why do you say that if a prohibited piece of meat falls into a pot of other pieces of meat, that's A falls in, and now you have B and C? So why do you tell me it's going to prohibit all the permitted pieces of meat? View it as it doesn't exist. Take the liquid in the pot, and it'll nullify it. And yet Rav told me, who goes like Rabbi Yehuda, that it's prohibited. So that seems to fly in the face of Rava in the name of Rabbi Yehuda. And the assumption is that everyone agrees that this is what Rabbi Yehuda holds. So how could Rav say that? But now it depends, what liquid is it in? And we would call it a thick chulin or a watery chulin, right? The thicker it is, the more it resembles the actual species. It's really a very thick liquid is too much like a solid already. Very thin liquid is just like watery. So, if it fell into a thin, meaning a watery texture, of course you're right. You'll do this thing where this doesn't exist, this nullifies that. Yeah. What must we be talking about? How come I skin on? The nafal barotev ava. It fell into a very thick gravy. So, and therefore we don't say this because the gravy, Rashi cleans is like it's not a different species. It's like the meat. We view it as a because it's so thick. Now, here comes another also very famous concept in the world of these discussions, is when that milk goes into a piece of meat. Now that meat falls into another pot. Can you ever get out that piece of milk that was in a piece of meat, or it's there forever? Either practically or halachically, two opinions, how you view it. But piece of milk, drop of milk falls into a piece of meat. Fine. Piece of meat falls into a big pot, an industrial pot, right? So now, is that milk inside that meat ever going to be nullified or not? So what's the difference? The difference is that when you take that piece of meat out, is it now permitted or prohibited? Can a piece of meat that became prohibited ever go back to its permitted state? So either it's a practical question that we just don't know exactly. How do you tell me that? How do you know if it ever left? There's always a little piece of milk that might be left in there. Or it's a halachic question. You can't kasher something that's been prohibited for some reason. So that's called efshir l'sokto. Sokto is to squeeze out. So we're saying now, umayika suffer. This Rav that held that milk goes into a piece of meat and prohibits the whole piece of meat, the assumption is that's only true if you view that the milk will never leave. If that milk that prohibits a piece of meat will never be removed, either halachically or practically, then you'll say the entire piece of meat becomes prohibited. But if you say it's only temporarily prohibited until it goes into another pot, once it goes into another pot, then this piece of meat will become permitted again. So it's just a temporary thing. It's just passing through. The milk's just passing through until the piece of meat gets nullified. Then the entire piece of meat is not going to be prohibited. We'll never say this idea called chanan, that it has the status of a prohibited piece of meat. So, hot cooking pot, yeah. So, umay kasaver. What do we hold? Ikasaver efshel sokto mutter. Right now, we're in the science lab with the theories right now. If you say that milk that goes into meat can at one point be removed and the piece of meat will be permitted, so then you'll say chaticha amay nasen avela. Why would you ever prohibit the piece of meat if milk goes into it? Always view it as it's just milk inside the meat. Don't transform the entire piece into prohibited. Rather, always view that it's prohibited because it's carrying milk. Nullify the milk, you're good to go. So, but that's not what Rav said. So it must be that Rav held. Rav must have held that when milk goes into a piece of meat, that piece of meat will never be permitted. Forget if it prohibits other things, but that piece of meat itself will never be permitted again. Even you can put into an industrial park from today until tomorrow 1,000 times it'll never be permitted for whatever the reason is. Either because we never know if the milk left it. How do you ever know? Once something has a status of prohibited, it can't go back to permitted. So but that is efshel soktos usher. It being squeezed out is not going to permit that piece of meat. Once you say that, then you'll say step 2 is the entire piece of meat becomes like a piece of non-kosher meat, and therefore it can prohibit other things. So that's all Rav, Rabbi Chanina, Rabbi Yochanan that all say that. However, Shmuel, Rabbi Shimon bar Rabbi, Vireish Lakish, they argue. They say the Amri efshel soktos mutter. They say no, milk that goes into a piece of meat could be permitted. The Savar Rav efshel sokto usher. Does Rav really hold that when milk goes into meat, that meat will never be permitted? The ha'itmar, but we have a statement of Rav. We have a statement that says as follows: you have a piece of meat, an olive's worth of meat that fell into a hot pot of milk. Amar Rav, basar aser, a call of mutter. Whoa, the meat is prohibited because it got milk inside of it, but the milk is permitted. So 1 second, why is the milk permitted? Next page. If you say that that piece of meat will never become permitted, it'll always remain prohibited, then it should prohibit the milk. You have now this is also a big to do, but the little bit of milk goes right. So a piece of meat falls into a pot of milk. What happens now? Milk goes into the piece of meat. So it turns the entire piece of meat into prohibited piece of meat. Now what happens, the way Rashi says, is that now milk gets extracted from that piece of meat. But that milk is no longer regular milk anymore. That's milk of a nevela. For all intents and purposes, that's like pork milk, right? Whatever it is, right? So now that milk that's removed from the piece of meat, when it meets up with its pot of milk that was not absorbed in the piece of meat, those are two things of the same species. It should prohibit it. It's milk and milk. It should prohibit, just like the blood and the cup don't nullify each other on Yom Kippur. So too, the milk and the milk should not nullify each other either, and therefore it should prohibit the entire pot of milk. But yet Rav said the milk is permitted. So why is the milk permitted? So it sounds like because that piece of meat never had a status of becoming totally prohibited. Rather, it was just a little bit of milk inside of it that was prohibited. but the entire piece remains permitted. But if that's true, then our page before doesn't make any sense. So we're trying to figure out, why is the milk in this pot permitted? It should really be prohibited. Yeah, let's stop here. Yeah, this is packed. Absolutely packed. First line, 108b.